The little girl wasn't supposed to be out that late. Bare feet, puffy eyes, hands shaking as she clutched her torn backpack like a shield. She walked straight into the neighborhood everyone avoided after sunset, straight toward the man everyone feared, the gang boss. He was sitting outside his club, cigarette glowing in the dark, when she stopped in front of him, too small, too scared, too desperate. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking. "He hurt my grandma." The cigarette froze halfway to his lips. The street went silent. Even the music inside the club died as his men turned to look. "Who?" the boss asked quietly. Not angry, not loud, just cold. The girl's chin trembled as she lifted a shaky finger and pointed toward a rundown apartment at the end of the street. A man was standing in the window, smirking, watching her, like he owned fear itself. The boss's jaw tightened. He knew that man. A violent repeat offender. Someone the courts kept letting walk free. The little girl's voice broke again. He hit her because she couldn't find money for rent. The gang boss stood slow, deliberate, deadly calm. He handed his jacket to one of his men, tossed his cigarette, then nodded once. "Get the car." Less than a minute later, his black SUV screeched to a stop right in front of the man's door. And what happened next? What that neighborhood heard, saw, and whispered about for months shook the entire city and turned that little girl into family. Stay with me until the end, because the truth about what the gang boss discovered inside that apartment changed everything. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Her name was Maria, 8 years old, and she'd been running for 3 blocks. The cuts on her feet left tiny drops of blood on the cracked sidewalk behind her. She didn't feel the pain anymore. Fear had swallowed everything else. The apartment behind her held the only family she had left. Her grandmother Elena, 73 years old, who worked double shifts at the laundromat just to keep food on their table, who sang lullabies in broken Spanish when Maria couldn't sleep, who kissed every scraped knee and promised everything would be okay. But tonight, everything wasn't okay. Maria had watched through the crack in her bedroom door as the man Elena rented a room to grabbed her grandmother's wrist. She'd heard the sharp crack that made Elena cry out. She'd seen her grandmother fall against the kitchen counter, clutching her side. "Where's my money, old woman?" he'd snarled, breath thick with alcohol and rage. "You think I'm running some charity here?" Elena had tried to explain. The laundromat was cutting hours. She'd have the rent by Friday. She just needed 3 more days. The man's response was a backhand across Elena's face that sent her glasses flying into the wall. That's when Maria ran. The neighborhood knew about Vincent Morales long before the little girl stumbled into his world. They called him El Jefe, the boss, not because of some romantic movie fantasy, but because of cold, calculated power that kept the streets in line when the police couldn't or wouldn't. Vincent didn't deal drugs to kids. He didn't hurt women. He didn't tolerate anyone who did. Those were his rules, carved in stone and enforced with swift, brutal justice. But tonight, as he sat outside his club watching the empty street, Vincent was thinking about his own grandmother, Abuela Rosa, who'd raised him after his parents died, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep him fed and in school, who'd died alone in a hospital bed, while Vincent was locked up for defending her honor against a man not unlike the one now terrorizing Elena. The irony wasn't lost on him. The system that had failed his grandmother was about to fail another. When Maria appeared at the edge of the streetlight, Vincent's Lieutenant Marco started to wave her away. Kids didn't belong here. Not at this hour. Not in this place. But something about the way she moved stopped him. The desperate determination. The way she kept looking over her shoulder like death itself was chasing her. Vincent held up a hand. Let her come. As Maria approached, Vincent could see the story written across her small frame. The torn pajamas, the dirt under her fingernails, the way she favored her left foot, where a piece of glass had cut deep. Most men in Vincent's position would have sent her away, would have called it someone else's problem. would have gone back to their cigarette and their quiet night. Vincent wasn't most men. "What's your name, little one?" he asked, his voice gentler than anyone on the street had ever heard it. "Maria," she whispered. "And where do you live, Maria?" She pointed again toward the apartment building. Vincent knew it well, a slum that should have been condemned years ago, but housed families who had nowhere else to go. Families the city had forgotten. "Tell me what happened." The words tumbled out between sobs. How her grandmother had taken in a boarder to help with rent. How he'd been drinking more, getting angrier. How tonight he'd demanded money they didn't have. And when Elena tried to explain, he'd hurt her. "She's bleeding," Maria whispered, "and she won't get up." Vincent's men watched their boss's face change. The careful control he maintained, the mask he wore to navigate his world, cracked just enough to show the fire underneath. But Vincent didn't explode, didn't rage. Instead, he knelt down to Maria's level and spoke in a voice steady as stone. "What's this man's name?" "Tommy. Tommy something. He smells like beer and he has a tattoo on his neck that looks like a snake." Vincent knew him. Tommy Rourke. Small-time criminal with a big-time habit of hurting people weaker than himself. The kind of predator who found elderly women and single mothers and made their lives hell for the price of cheap rent. The kind of man Vincent had been waiting for an excuse to visit. "Maria," Vincent said, standing, "I want you to stay right here with my friend Marco. He's going to get you some shoes and something to drink. But my grandma? I'm going to take care of your grandma." Something in his tone made Maria stop arguing, made her nod and take Marco's offered hand. Vincent walked to his SUV, his movements deliberate and calm. His men knew that walk. They'd seen it before. Right before Vincent delivered the kind of justice the courts never would. As the engine started, Vincent thought about the choice every man faces when confronted with evil. You can look away, tell yourself it's not your problem, hope someone else will handle it, or you can handle it yourself. The SUV pulled away from the curb with Vincent behind the wheel and 3 of his most trusted men beside him. They drove the 2 blocks to Elena's building in complete silence, each man understanding exactly what was about to happen. In the apartment building, Tommy Rourke was celebrating his dominance with another beer. Elena lay crumpled on the kitchen floor, too hurt to move, too scared to call for help. He had no idea that help was already here. The apartment building's front door hung crooked on rusted hinges. Vincent pushed it open without knocking. The hallway reeked of mold and broken dreams, the kind of place where hope went to die. Tommy Rourke's laughter echoed from apartment 2B, loud, drunk, victorious. The sound made Vincent's blood run cold. His men flanked him as they climbed the narrow stairs, no words needed. They'd done this dance before, but tonight felt different. Tonight, an 8-year-old girl with bloody feet had trusted Vincent with her entire world. The apartment door was thin, cheap wood that wouldn't stop a determined child, let alone 4 men who'd made violence their profession. Vincent tried the handle first. Locked. He stepped back and nodded to Santos, his enforcer. 1 kick. The door exploded inward, wood splintering like thunder. Tommy Rourke spun around, beer bottle frozen halfway to his lips. His eyes went wide when he saw Vincent standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the hallway light like death's own messenger. "Vincent Morales," Tommy stammered, trying to sound tough but failing miserably. "What the hell are you doing here?" Vincent's gaze swept the apartment. Overturned furniture, broken dishes, and there, crumpled on the linoleum kitchen floor, Elena, her gray hair matted with blood, her frail body trembling as she tried to push herself up against the cabinet. The sight hit Vincent like a physical blow. Abuela Rosa lying in that hospital bed, alone, forgotten, while he rotted in a cell for trying to protect her from men exactly like Tommy Rourke. "Get away from her," Vincent said quietly. Tommy's false bravado crumbled. He knew Vincent's reputation. Everyone in the city knew what happened to men who crossed El Jefe, but desperation and alcohol made him stupid. "She owes me money," Tommy slurred. "This is my place. You got no business here." Vincent stepped into the apartment. His men spread out behind him, blocking every exit. The air grew thick with the kind of tension that preceded violence. Your place? Vincent's voice remained deadly calm. You hurt an old woman in your place? I didn't hurt nobody. She fell. The lie hung in the air like smoke. Vincent looked again at Elena, who was now watching him with confused, frightened eyes. The bruises on her face told a different story than Tommy's words. Vincent had built his reputation on swift, brutal justice. Men who crossed him disappeared. Businesses that didn't pay protection burned. The police looked the other way because Vincent kept the real monsters off the streets. But this wasn't business. This was personal. Elena, Vincent said gently, crouching beside the old woman. I'm here to help. Maria sent me. At her granddaughter's name, Elena's eyes filled with tears. Maria, is she safe? I told her to run, but she's safe, Vincent assured her. She's with my men. She's brave, that little girl. Braver than most grown men I know. Vincent helped Elena sit up against the cabinet. His touch surprisingly gentle for hands that had done so much violence. He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed his personal doctor. Doc, I need you at the Riverside Apartments. Building C, Apartment 2B. Elderly woman, possible broken ribs, head trauma. And Doc, this is family. Tommy watched this exchange with growing panic. He'd heard stories about Vincent's family, how El Jefe protected them, how crossing Vincent's family was signing your own death warrant. Look, Vincent, maybe we can work something out. Tommy started backing toward the kitchen window. I didn't know the old lady was connected. We can forget this whole thing, right? Vincent stood slowly, his full attention now focused on Tommy. The room seemed to shrink around them. Connected? Vincent's voice was barely above a whisper. You think this is about connections? He took a step forward. Tommy pressed himself against the window. This is about an 8-year-old girl with blood on her feet, running through the worst neighborhood in the city because she thought I might be the only one who could help her grandmother. Another step. Tommy's hands shook as he fumbled for the window latch. This is about a 73-year-old woman who works 2 jobs and still can't afford rent, getting beaten by a piece of garbage who thinks being stronger makes him right. The window wouldn't budge. Tommy was trapped. And this, Vincent continued, now close enough to smell the stale beer on Tommy's breath, is about teaching you what happens when you hurt my family. Your family? I've never seen these people before in my life. Vincent smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're right. You haven't. But that little girl trusted me with her pain. That old woman needed protection, and the law failed her. So now they're mine to protect. Santos appeared at Vincent's shoulder, cracking his knuckles. Luis flanked Tommy's other side. Miguel blocked the kitchen doorway. Tommy's eyes darted desperately around the room. Come on, Vincent, she's fine. Look, she's sitting up. No real harm done, right? Vincent looked back at Elena, who was holding her ribs and trying not to cry, at the overturned chair where she'd been sitting when Tommy attacked her, at the broken picture frame on the floor, a photo of Elena and Maria at the park, both smiling. No real harm? Vincent's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than any shout. She's someone's grandmother, Tommy. She's that little girl's whole world. Vincent thought about his own grandmother's funeral. How small the casket looked. How few people came. How the system had failed her every single day until the very end. Not this time. Not Elena. Not Maria. Please, Tommy whimpered. I'll leave. I'll never come back. I swear. Vincent considered this. It would be easy. Clean. Let Tommy run with his tail between his legs, and maybe he'd learned his lesson. But Vincent knew better. Men like Tommy didn't learn lessons. They found new victims, weaker targets. They moved their violence somewhere else and called it progress. The sound of sirens cut through the night air. Not police. Vincent's doctor, arriving with his private ambulance. Within minutes, paramedics were gently helping Elena onto a stretcher, checking her vitals, ensuring she'd received the care she deserved. As they wheeled Elena past him, she grabbed Vincent's hand with surprising strength. Thank you, she whispered. But please don't hurt him because of me. I don't want Maria to lose you too. The words hit Vincent harder than any punch he'd ever taken. This woman, broken and bleeding, was worried about him, about the consequences he might face for protecting her. It was exactly what Abuela Rosa would have said. Vincent squeezed Elena's hand gently. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. You and Maria are safe now. As the paramedics carried Elena away, Vincent turned back to Tommy, who was now openly crying. You know what the funny thing is, Tommy, Vincent said conversationally. I came here planning to kill you. Simple, clean, permanent solution to the problem you represent. Tommy's legs gave out. He slid down the wall to the floor. But that old woman just asked me not to hurt you. Imagine that. After what you did to her, she's worried about your well-being. Vincent crouched down to Tommy's level, the way he had with Maria, but his voice carried none of the gentleness he'd shown the little girl. So here's what's going to happen instead. Vincent's words hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Tommy's face had gone white as fresh snow, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool night breeze flowing through the broken window. You're going to pack your things. Right now, everything you own fits in 2 bags, or it stays here forever. Santos stepped forward, pulling out his phone. I'll call the boys to make sure he understands the timeline. No, Vincent said quietly. He understands perfectly. Don't you, Tommy? Tommy nodded frantically, scrambling to his feet and rushing toward the bedroom. The sound of drawers being yanked open and clothes being stuffed into bags filled the silence. Vincent walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the street below. His SUV was parked under a broken streetlight, and in the passenger seat, he could see Maria's small silhouette. She was wearing Marco's oversized jacket now, her tiny frame swimming in the black leather. The sight made something twist in Vincent's chest. How many nights had he spent as a kid, waiting in cars while adults made decisions that would change his life forever? How many times had he wished someone would just tell him everything would be okay? Boss, Luis called softly from the doorway. Doc says Elena's got 2 cracked ribs and a mild concussion. He's taking her to St. Mary's for observation. But she'll be fine. Good. Vincent's voice was steady, but his hands clenched into fists. Make sure she gets a private room, best care they have. Already handled. And boss? The little girl keeps asking when she can see her grandmother. Vincent turned away from the window. Tommy was still throwing clothes into a duffel bag, his movements frantic and desperate. Every few seconds, he'd glance toward Vincent like he was checking to see if death was still waiting for him. Tell Maria we'll go see Elena as soon as Tommy finishes his packing. The sounds from the bedroom grew more frantic. Dresser drawers slamming shut, the screech of hangers across a closet rod, the desperate rustle of a man trying to fit his entire life into 2 bags before his luck ran out. Vincent's phone buzzed. A text from Marco. Girl wants to know if her grandma will be okay. What do I tell her? Vincent typed back. Tell her grandma's safe now. Tell her she was brave. Tell her I keep my promises. The truth was, Vincent had made a lot of promises in his life. Most of them involved what would happen to people who crossed him. But the promise he'd made to an 8-year-old girl with bloody feet felt different. It felt like the kind of promise that could save him or damn him, depending on how well he kept it. Tommy stumbled back into the living room, dragging 2 overstuffed bags behind him. His face was flushed red from exertion and fear, dark stains spreading under his arms despite the cool night air. I'm ready, he gasped. I'm ready to go. Vincent studied him for a long moment. In all his years running these streets, he'd dealt with hundreds of men like Tommy, cowards who picked on the weak because they couldn't face anyone their own size, men who confused cruelty with strength and violence with power. Where will you go? Vincent asked. Tommy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He hadn't thought that far ahead, probably figured he'd be dead by now. I got a cousin in Detroit. Maybe I can crash there for a while. Detroit's good, far away. Different state, different rules. Vincent stepped closer, and Tommy instinctively backed toward the door. But here's the thing about rules, Tommy. Mine follow you wherever you go. Santos and Luis flanked Tommy on either side, close enough to grab him if he tried to run, close enough to hear every word Vincent was about to say. You ever lay hands on another woman, another old person, another child, and I'll hear about it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. And when I do, Vincent let the sentence hang unfinished. Sometimes the threat you didn't voice was more powerful than the one you did. I understand, Tommy whispered. Do you? Because I don't think you understand what happened here tonight. You think this is about rent money. You think this is about an old woman who couldn't pay her bills. Vincent moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. This is about an 8-year-old girl who ran barefoot through the worst neighborhood in the city because she believed I might help her. This is about the kind of trust that can't be bought or sold or stolen. This is about family, Tommy. And family is forever. The word forever seemed to echo in the small apartment. Tommy's bags shook in his trembling hands. You hurt my family tonight. You made that little girl run to a gang leader for protection because the law failed her. You made an old woman bleed on her own kitchen floor because you thought being bigger made you right. Vincent reached into his jacket, and Tommy's eyes went wide with terror. But instead of a weapon, Vincent pulled out a thick roll of cash. This is $3,000. Elena's medical bills, plus first and last month's rent on a better place, plus enough left over for whatever else she and Maria need. He held the money out, and Tommy stared at it like it might explode. Take it. I don't understand. Take the money, Tommy. You're going to hand it to my man Santos before you leave this building. He's going to make sure it gets to Elena, and you're going to know that the old woman you beat tonight is going to live better because you're gone. Tommy's hands shook as he accepted the cash. The bills felt heavy in his palm, heavier than money should feel. Why? He whispered. Vincent smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because I want you to remember this moment for the rest of your life. I want you to remember that I could have killed you tonight, that I should have killed you tonight, but I didn't. He leaned closer, close enough that Tommy could smell his cologne, expensive and clean. I want you to remember that an old woman you beat asked me to spare your life, and I want you to think about that every single day, Tommy. I want you to think about the kind of man you are, and the kind of man she is, and maybe, if you're very lucky, you'll figure out how to become someone worthy of the mercy she showed you. Vincent stepped back and nodded to Santos, who took the money from Tommy's shaking hands. Miguel's going to drive you to the bus station. You've got 30 minutes to buy a ticket to anywhere that isn't here. After that, if I see you in my city again, mercy becomes a memory. Miguel appeared in the doorway, keys jangling in his hand. He was the youngest of Vincent's crew, barely 25, but his eyes carried the kind of hardness that came from growing up in places where childhood ended early. Let's go, Miguel said quietly. Tommy grabbed his bags and stumbled toward the door. Halfway there, he stopped and turned back to Vincent. For what it's worth, he said, his voice cracking. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Vincent studied him for a moment. The apology sounded genuine. Born from fear, maybe, but genuine nonetheless. It was more than most men in Tommy's position offered. Don't apologize to me, Vincent said finally. Apologize to the mirror. Apologize to whatever God you believe in. Apologize to every person you've ever hurt. But don't apologize to me, Tommy. I'm not the one you wronged tonight. Tommy nodded and followed Miguel out the door. The sound of their footsteps echoed down the stairwell, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. Vincent stood alone in the destroyed apartment, surrounded by overturned furniture and the lingering smell of fear. Santos and Luis remained by the door, waiting for orders. Clean this up, Vincent said quietly. Everything. I want this place spotless by morning. New furniture, fresh paint, whatever it takes. When Elena comes home from the hospital, I want her to walk into a palace. What about the landlord? Luis asked. This is his property. Vincent's smile was sharp as a blade. The landlord just sold this building to a shell company I own. Elena and Maria live here rent-free now. Forever. Santos grinned. I love it when we get to play real estate mogul. This isn't about money, Vincent said, walking toward the door. This is about making sure that little girl never has to run barefoot through the night again. Outside, the city hummed with its usual late-night energy. Sirens in the distance, the rumble of traffic on the highway, the sound of life continuing, indifferent to the small drama that had just played out in apartment 2B. Vincent climbed into his SUV, where Maria was curled up in the passenger seat, still wearing Marco's jacket. Her eyes were closed, but Vincent could tell she wasn't really sleeping, just pretending, the way kids do when they're scared and don't want adults to know. "Hey there, brave girl," he said softly. Maria's eyes opened immediately. "Is my grandma okay?" "She's going to be fine. The doctors are taking good care of her. And we're going to see her right now." "And the bad man?" Vincent started the engine, the powerful motor purring to life. "The bad man is gone. He won't hurt anyone ever again." Maria sat up straighter, studying Vincent's face in the dim light from the dashboard. "Are you a good man or a bad man?" The question hit Vincent like a physical blow. In all his years running the streets, no one had ever asked him that so directly. His enemies called him a monster. His allies called him a leader. The police called him a criminal. But an 8-year-old girl wanted to know if he was good or bad. And Vincent realized he didn't have a simple answer. "I try to be good to the people who matter," he said finally. "Do I matter?" Vincent looked at her small face, serious and trusting and brave beyond her years. She'd run through the worst neighborhood in the city to save her grandmother. She'd trusted a stranger with her pain. She'd shown more courage in one night than most adults managed in a lifetime. "Yes," he said quietly. "You matter very much." Maria smiled then. The first real smile Vincent had seen from her all night. It transformed her face, made her look like the child she should have been allowed to be. "Then you're a good man," she said simply. As they drove through the empty streets toward the hospital, Vincent found himself thinking about the choices that had led him to this moment, the violence that had shaped him, the anger that had driven him, the empire he'd built on fear and respect, and the kind of justice the law couldn't provide. But tonight, for the first time in years, Vincent felt like maybe he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Maybe all the darkness in his past had been leading to this moment, to this little girl who trusted him, to this chance to be the hero someone needed. The hospital loomed ahead, its windows glowing warm against the night sky. Inside those walls, Elena was safe and healing. And beside him, Maria was finally going home to the only family she had left. Vincent Morales had built his reputation on being feared. But tonight, he discovered something more powerful than fear. Tonight, he discovered what it felt like to be trusted, to be needed, to be good. And for the first time in his life, that felt like enough. Like enough. The elevator at St. Mary's Hospital moved with agonizing slowness, each floor marked by a soft ding that echoed in the cramped space. Maria pressed herself against Vincent's side, her small hand gripping his leather jacket like a lifeline. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh white light that made the world feel too bright, too clean, too different from the darkness they'd left behind. "What if she doesn't remember me?" Maria whispered as they reached the 4th floor. Vincent looked down at her, seeing his own childhood fears reflected in her wide eyes. "She'll remember you. Grandmothers always remember." The hallway stretched before them, lined with rooms full of people, fighting their own battles. Vincent had walked these corridors before, visiting men from his crew who'd been shot or stabbed or beaten. But tonight felt different. Tonight, he wasn't here for business or obligation. Tonight, he was bringing a little girl home to the only family she had left. Room 412 stood at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. Through the gap, Vincent could see Elena sitting up in bed, her gray hair neatly combed, her face bruised but alert. She was staring out the window at the city lights below, lost in thought. Maria's steps slowed as they approached the door. Vincent could feel her trembling again. The same fear that had driven her through the streets now holding her back from the reunion she'd risked everything to achieve. "What if she's angry at me for running away?" Maria asked. "She won't be angry," Vincent said softly. "She'll be proud. You saved her life tonight." He knocked gently on the doorframe. Elena turned, and when she saw Maria standing in the doorway, her entire face transformed. The pain, the worry, the fear all melted away, replaced by pure joy. "Micha," Elena breathed, holding out her arms. Maria burst into tears and ran to the bed, careful not to jostle her grandmother as she climbed up and buried her face in Elena's neck. Elena held her tight, whispering words in Spanish that Vincent didn't understand, but recognized as the language of love, of relief, of family reunited. Vincent stood in the doorway, watching this moment that belonged to them alone. He thought about all the families he'd torn apart in his career, all the children who'd lost fathers and mothers to his decisions. But here was something different. Here was a family he'd helped keep together. "Thank you," Elena said over Maria's head, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to repay what you've done." "You don't owe me anything," Vincent replied. "You asked me to spare Tommy's life, and I did. That makes us even." Elena's eyes widened slightly. She'd expected revenge, violence, the kind of street justice everyone whispered about when Vincent Morales got involved. "He's alive? He's gone. Far away. He won't bother you again." Vincent stepped into the room, his presence somehow both comforting and imposing. "But that's not why I'm here." 3 months later, Maria started calling him Uncle Vincent. Elena insisted he join them for Sunday dinners, where she'd cook enough food for an army and tell stories about her childhood in Mexico, while Maria did her homework at the kitchen table. The apartment had been transformed into something beautiful, filled with new furniture and fresh paint, but more importantly, filled with laughter and safety. Vincent discovered that being trusted meant more than being feared, that protecting innocence felt better than commanding respect, that sometimes the most powerful thing a man could do was show up when a child needed him most. The neighborhood still whispered about that night, but the stories had changed. Now they talked about the gang boss who became a guardian angel, about how real strength wasn't about taking what you wanted, but about protecting what mattered, about how family isn't always blood, sometimes it's choice.